Welcome to the Revelation of Hope podcast with your host, Alvin Bonds II. Join us each week as Alvin explores the relationship between leadership and families by interviewing leaders in different fields all over the world. Alvin believes that the success of tomorrow's leaders begins with the success of today's families.
Hello, welcome to the Revelation of Hope podcast. I am your host, Alvin Bonds II, and welcome to episode 8. Today, I interview Neru Gobin. Before I get to my interview with Neru, I'd like to talk a little bit about listening. As you know, I'm a licensed mental health and family therapist, and any of my sessions that involve more than one person, it is usually spent helping people understand communication. We all communicate differently. Men communicate differently than women. Boys communicate differently than girls. Someone born in the 1950s communicates differently than someone born in the 1980s. It goes on and on. But it's important to understand how you communicate and how the person that you're trying to speak with communicates. This goes to any relationship that you may have. Spouses, husbands or wives, it's important to understand how you communicate versus how your spouse communicates. Generally, men communicate using less words than women communicate. It would not be uncommon for a man to communicate something to a woman, but not be very explicit. For example, a man may say, I'm going to the store to get charcoal. I'll be back in a few. Well, that man may have only said what he was going to do, but it was implied to his spouse, while I'm going to the store, why don't you go ahead and tenderize the meat? Why don't you go ahead and season the food? Why don't you do something to be productive or helpful to get the process going? Not every man is alike, not every woman is alike, but most of my experiences, men communicate this way. And it's not a bad or good thing. It's just how one communicates. And if that spouse isn't aware of how that husband communicates, there's going to be confusion. So it's important to understand how one communicates, but also to become better at communicating. If that wife or spouse doesn't understand what the other one is communicating, then we need to become more explicit. So, for example, the husband may say, sweetheart, I'm going to the store to get charcoal. Would you mind tenderizing the meat before I get back? And that way it's very explicit. Some relationships are where the husband and wife are in sync in their communication. So the husband may say, he may start a sentence by saying, sweetheart, I'm going to the store to get charcoal. And she may add, oh, okay, I'll go ahead and tenderize the meat and season it so it'll be ready when you get back. That's one way that, husbands and wives can communicate. And that takes practice. It doesn't come instantly and it doesn't come easily. It's something that has to be practiced over and over again. You'll also discover communication breakdowns between you and your children. Sometimes our children are very selective in what they hear, and especially if it's something that's uncomfortable or may interrupt what they're doing, they may not hear everything. It's also important to understand how your supervisor or boss communicates. That can be very stressful for you and your boss. If you have a boss who communicates very detailed, giving you, specific instructions, do this, do that. And when you get finished, check in with me. I'll give you the next instructions. And you may not be used to receiving communication that way and may think that to be micromanaging. And it may be, but it's important that you are able to have that conversation with your supervisor. One of the things I do whenever I start a new job with a new supervisor, always ask my immediate supervisor their style of communication. Theirs, as well as what level of communication that they're looking for from me. I may be a type of person that will communicate every now and then to my supervisor what I'm working on, But if I have a supervisor who needs to know things more frequently, I need to be able to communicate that to them. Otherwise, there's a breakdown in communication, and that will affect productivity, camaraderie. It will even affect the relationship between supervisor and supervisee. It's important to understand what is expected of you, but it is most important to understand how you listen. How you listen to someone that may be interesting to you, how you listen to a spouse, how you listen to your children, and how your mood affects how you listen. If you're extremely tired, you may not listen as intently as you would any other time. If the game is on, or you're playing a game, or you're doing something, or you're eating, or you're talking on the phone with someone else, those are things that affect how we listen and receive information. So I invite you to take a moment and just reflect on how you listen. There's a lot of research available about listening and improving listening skills. I don't want to discuss that today, but just want to encourage you to take a look at how you listen. One of the things we as counselors do is called active listening, and anyone can do active listening. And listening may seem like it's a passive task, but it's truly active. It's important that you are present and focused on what's being said to you, and be able to communicate that back to the person with whom you're speaking to show that person, hey, you're listening. Hey, what they're saying is important to you, and that you're going to apply it. One of the things Neru mentions in his interview is how important it is for leaders to be able to listen. So as you listen to my interview with Neru, consider how you as a leader communicate to those with whom you lead, or if you are someone who that has a leader or a supervisor over them, think about how your leader or supervisor communicates with you. Is it the way you want? Is it helpful to you? How can it be improved? How can you improve your communication to your leader or those with whom you lead? I'm glad to interview Neru for the podcast. Neru is the Assistant Director of the Office of Crisis Services and Suicide Prevention of the Tennessee Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services. I am thankful and grateful for Neru being able to do this interview with me. So welcome, Neru, to the podcast. Tell us a little bit about you.
Well, thank you, Alvin, for having me on this podcast. I'm really grateful for the opportunity. I appreciate you reaching out to me.
Yeah.
So I am, I work in Tennessee, actually with the Tennessee State, particularly with the Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services, and serving as the Assistant Director for the Office of Crisis Services and Suicide Prevention. That role is what I do professionally. And just a little bit about what that is that, I'm responsible for the oversight of the and management of our entire statewide crisis response services continuum, which includes mobile crisis, our crisis stabilization units, our walk-in centers, all of those programs that are aimed to respond to folks who are in behavioral health crises. And if they need any kind of emergency intervention, we have available services for them in 365, so that folks have the opportunity to get the help that they need regardless of their ability to pay. So I've been doing that service for about 4 years now, and prior to that I worked in a local area crisis service, actually doing a direct response in that same realm. And so all of that very rewarding experience for me on the professional end. And also personally, I serve in my church as in a ministry, in the mental health and substance abuse ministry, as well as athletics ministry, serving as a coach there. And so I'm relatively full with a lot of things that I have been interested in, both personally and professionally. And I'm from Chicago originally. in Nashville, Tennessee for probably about the better part of 18 to 20 years.
Wow. So your professional and personal life is dedicated to serving. That's pretty amazing.
Well, I feel like it's something that has kind of naturally came about with me throughout life. I didn't really say, you know what, I woke up one day and decided that I want to serve. Sometimes I've come to realize now what it's meant when people say that they're called to do something.
Yeah.
You don't really make an actual choice to do it. It's on you and your life, and then before you know, you look back on it, you say, well, I guess I have been serving. And I think that kind of probably originated just from my role as a young person in my family, which is, just for a long time I look back on it, and in many respects, I was a bit of an anchor for my family even at a very young age.
Yeah.
And so I think that just kind of translated as to what kind of service or role that I would play in my adult life.
And you have a leadership position in the department and even at your church, taking on the ministry, the mental health part. How did you get involved in leadership in these areas?
Well, I think it started for me, particularly in the mental health realm, both the church and the personal life. I think it started with me probably, back in probably right after I graduated from college. When I decided that it was something that I wanted to go back into my roots of psychology, I could get my undergraduate studies in psychology. Always had a love for that way from way back in high school. And then when, after graduating from the University of Illinois in Champaign, Illinois, I stayed there on campus in a campus town for a couple of years working at a hospital. And it was kind of outside of my scope of study, but it was a job to pay the bills, and I realized that I was still kind of missing out on what I wanted to do. Mm-hmm. And so I had the opportunity to have some family that was living in Nashville for a few years, so I moved in here to stay with them for a little bit so I could get my feet, under me here in Nashville. And when I started working in crisis services, I didn't realize it, but as a crisis responder, I was naturally taking on a leadership role, even though I wasn't a supervisor or a director or anything like that. When someone is in an emergency situation or they are in need, they need somebody strong to be able to kind of take that moment to help them, be that pillar when they don't have the strength at that moment. So without me even realizing it, I was leading folks when they were at their worst. Yes. And if you can help people lead them when they're at their worst, then you can lead people even when they're in a very structured environment and setting.
You're right.
And you just got to know how to translate that, into other arenas. And I think it served me well, and I thank God for that.
That's powerful. And it takes, as you know, a definitely a called and a special person to do the work that we do. And it sometimes can be a thankless job, but you are in a position to be able to offer influence and also advocate for people. I'm curious, what is your individual philosophy of leadership?
Well, that's a very good question. And I wish I would, I did a leadership training last year for a couple of weeks, and they talked about what is your elevator speech for your job, and we had crafted something that, spoke to our jobs. And I thought about it later, and I said, I probably need to have an elevator speech. But what is it that makes you, your in the words that you use in my philosophy. And I'll admit that I didn't really craft something. Just, this is what I'm going to say and stage to prepare. Yeah. But if you would have asked me, since you asked me that today about, what do I consider myself a leadership philosophy, I think my philosophy first is to, when you're a leader, I think the most important key of being a leader is to listen. Mm-hmm. I think that is one of the most important things, to humble yourself and to listen. No one will follow someone for any extended period of time if they're not being made to feel that they are given the time to be heard,
Yeah.
and that person seems sincere. And you can't really be truly sincere if you're not humble. And when you don't demonstrate that humility, folks that are in need of leadership pick that up really, really quick.
Yeah.
And so my philosophy is you lead by example. So don't ask anybody to do anything that you're not already doing, willing to jump in and do. Show them in ways that what is the best, way to go about doing things, and that you're working hard, because then they want to work hard with you. And then when you call on them and you need them, they're going to go to bat for you.
Yeah.
And then also to work on finding what their leadership skills are. I believe everybody has some type of leadership quality in them, that whether they've discovered it or not. And sometimes good leaders can help people find what those things are. And so I always, any opportunity I've had to lead, whether it was a coaching at the church or serving in my ministry or even working in my professional life, the folks that I've supervised, is to help them, realize that, I want you to have opportunities for growth too, and to help you recognize what your strengths are, so that you can lead others too. Because I believe that we're all brought here to do certain things so that we can help others. Leading is a very strong tool to help and serve others.
Yeah, and you've definitely, specifically from your experience as a direct crisis responder, but also in your leadership, you definitely see how necessary it is to be able to listen and to be able to lead and guide. I'm interested in hearing from you if there's been anybody in your life that may have influenced that particular leadership model or philosophy that you've developed.
I would have to, there's several people when I reflect back on that showed me that. I would say that there were several people in my family. My mom is an extremely strong woman who didn't really come from any kind of affluent or advantaged background. She's from Belize, Central America. Came to the United States at a very young age on her own, just to seek out an opportunity to actually try to provide for her mother, who she left behind, and her little brothers. And I've heard a lot of her stories, but even when I was a child coming up and her being a single parent for a good chunk of her time, to really see things that I didn't even realize what she was going through, because when you're a kid, you just realize that, you're just getting the things that you need.
Yeah.
You don't know how a parent or a loved one or an older person in your family has gone about and the sacrifices they made to be able to provide it to you. But as I got older, you become more observant, get your first job, and now you're learning about, wow, it's not so easy to kind of go about doing these things. You realize what people have done.
Yeah.
And she was a very strong example of, whether she realized it or not, I know we talk about it, and she was like, oh, I'm not a leader. And I'm like, yeah, you are. Because she showed me, without talking to me in words, but in her actions, what it is to lead. And what she did was she put me and my siblings first, but she did it in such a way that we still had a level of reverence and respect for how she went about doing things and with the rules that she made. But she did it in love that we had. It was this high level of respect to be able to be happy and willing to do it. And so I think she was, my sister, when she went to school, she's 5 years my senior. When I was a kid, she went to school, come back, and teach me everything that she learned. And if I didn't get it, she had zero tolerance for it. So it was tough lessons like that, too. And I think leaders need to be able to absorb tough lessons so that they can be stronger. So influences like that, I think, are probably the most pivotal points of that. And then in my professional career, I've had some great supervisors that I've, people who are allowing folks to be who they are so that they can work within their God-given strengths to contribute to whatever the overall purpose and goal is at a given job or service. I think things that kind of help mold what my own leadership style. So the list is probably pretty long.
Yeah.
I think the family is really strong for me.
And I appreciate you sharing the experiences that your mother had, coming to this country and really just living her life and taking care of her children and not even realizing she was setting a standard or creating a standard of life and of leadership for your family, especially your sister giving back to you everything that she's learned. I wonder if you've encountered in your professional life, past or present, I guess, difference in leadership style, yours versus a supervisor's, and how did you overcome that? If you had a supervisor whose leadership style may have been different than yours.
Yeah, I've experienced that on several occasions in my professional life where I've had supervisors that, there may have been some bumps in the road in the beginning because it didn't quite align with how I thought it should go about. You got different styles. You've got styles that are, really, really laid back and let you do what you want to do.
Mm-hmm.
And it might go all the way to the extreme of just completely hands off that you're not even giving any direction or appropriate leadership.
Yeah.
On the other end of the spectrum, you get those that are probably on a little very high controlling end, or tend to be a little bit more micromanaging. And so, I've experienced probably the entire spectrum of it and responded better in atmospheres where it's a little more hands off for me. But I have also learned in that leadership training I attended last year about the diversity in leadership.
Yeah.
And how there is probably not a right or wrong way to lead as much as it is. It might be what is your own leadership style and what leadership style works best for you when you're operating on a team. And so, and it might be more aligned upon what the demands are, the task at hand is, and so I think for me, it's like I know that, where I thrive the most is when I can share my perspective and it's received well, or even if it's not agreed upon.
Yeah.
There's a big difference about sharing a perspective to deliberate on versus sharing a perspective with the intention that, we're going to go with what I said, and I think sometimes it can be misinterpreted that way. And instead, that's why I say that I think one of the most important things in leadership is to listen. It's really key to hear what other folks that are working with you or reporting to you, or that you report to hear what they're saying, so that you can communicate better. We can't lead or hold a team, or even in a family unit, you can't do those things unless you're communicating effectively. And so, just having that wide spectrum thing, each one of them, even ones that weren't as favorable to me, has helped to shape me, because I realized when you're on the receiving end of it, you say, I'm not sure if I liked how that felt.
Yeah.
So it's helped me to make sure I do a systems check internally to make sure that my delivery to others that I lead, that they don't feel what I felt, and that to know that there's other strategies. One of the best leaders that I've had in my current position had shared with me. I asked her just for some advice, and she told me, she said, the strongest bit of advice I can tell you is that in supervision is always take a moment to pull yourself out of yourself and think about how that other person would want to feel. And that is one of the most important things, that the strongest messages that I received, and I'll never forget that. And I thank her for sharing that with me a couple of years back, and it just helps put things in perspective, about it. And so that's the leadership style that works best for me. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work well for everyone. I think the more you've been being tuned on who you are and what you respond best to, and what atmosphere allows you to work the best in your skill set and your gifts, is probably the leadership style that you'll probably operate the best in.
And that is so true, in understanding yourself and your own strengths and areas of improvement and where you thrive the best, but just recognizing that not everyone is going to cater to our leadership needs or needs of direction or supervision, and so being able to be flexible regardless of the leadership style. I think that is truly important. And you talked about having that leadership, in the professional area, but also in a family. How has leadership or your leadership philosophy, how does that apply to your own house or your own family?
I'm glad that you asked that question. And I have, the American family, I guess, has kind of evolved, from maybe about 50 to 100 years ago, where, you go in one household, the family looks one way, and another household is completely different. And I think that diversity in itself is not just from a demographic standpoint, but also probably from a leadership style standpoint within that home, too. So in my household right now, and I've been married for, close to 3 years. And, and between my wife and I, we lead a household that includes my two stepsons. And, she and I had been together for quite some time before we actually got married. And, I played a pivotal role in their upbringing from the adolescent years through their teenage years. And I'm grateful to be able to have a relationship where it's totally out of some very unique circumstance and can be very challenging as a step-parent.
Yeah.
Especially when you're trying to instill discipline, and also instilling rules and, abiding of those rules and, leading in the right way and giving the right advice and making sure that you're not trying to replace and be their dad if they have their biological dad in their life, and so there's a really strong balance there. And so I'm so grateful for the experience that I've had in leadership in my professional life, and even in my, my childhood family life, has kind of helped to translate about to modify what is needed for my household now. And so, my mom being a single parent, but then my stepdad came in my life who, he's my dad, now, because I love him as if he was, and there's no different, so I didn't realize that was teaching me a lot about what it is to be a step parent.
Yeah.
But to get to your question, what it taught me is how important it is to remember that you kind of like what you said, Lord, to have that ability and willingness to adjust. So there's no specific script that's going to work or formula that's going to work that worked 10 years ago in one circumstance. You can apply it directly to another one.
Right.
And I've learned in my family life that I've had to make adjustments too, because the dynamics is a little bit different. And so so my leadership style with my boys, and I think there might be a difference between boys and girls too.
Mm-hmm.
I had to teach my boys to learn, and I told my wife, I said, my goal is to teach them to be a man. They're not going to be a boy forever. They're going to be men forever.
Right.
And so I want to have them. They're going to have some tough lessons, but they're always going to know that I'm here to listen and I'm here to support them. I'm not somebody that is, overly forthcoming, probably a little bit more laid back than my wife is when it comes to discipline, but it comes with a specific purpose. It's in a way that is, allow them to make the mistakes and to hit their head against the wall a few times, so that, because I know boys.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, my mom would tell me to do certain things, not to do certain things, and I had to figure out why. I just had to figure out why. And, and I did it. And, of course, it's going to be perceived by most moms as being defiant. And I respect that, because that's what I've learned in my life throughout the women in my life. My mom, my grandmother, my sister, my brother, and I did experience that very firsthand. And so my wife was able to do that with them. So I allow her to do that with them, which is wonderful. So for me, it was like I realized that I had to be that person that said, what, I'm going to watch them. I'm going to let them hit their head. I'm going to let them go through the tough times and everything. Because then they're going to come and they're going to hit a wall.
Yes.
And they're going to, what am I doing wrong?
Yes.
What's going on? That is when, in my opinion, that the lesson and the advice and the wisdom that's shared is going to really be absorbed and really sustained. And so because of that, and that's been a philosophy that has worked well in our relationship. And so I'm grateful because now I have my oldest stepson who's a graduate from Vanderbilt University with a computer engineering degree. My youngest stepson now is entering his fourth year at Tennessee Tech University for an accounting degree. So God blessed me with the ability to contribute to them to become better leaders in their young age now, so that that method, I just believe that it has some type of impact in a positive way for them to learn and for things to absorb and sustain as they get older and start figuring out who they are. So that's how that's translated in my family life.
And that is so beautiful. And that's the reason for this podcast is, as a marriage and family therapist, I have the opportunity to see like you said, different family makeup, but it's all the same. It's family, whether it's a single mother or a 2-parent family or a step parent or even grandparents raising their children.
Right.
It's family. And I personally believe that the success of tomorrow's leaders begins with the success of today's families. What do you think about that?
Amen. I agree with you 100%. I believe that, I love the way you said that because, and I couldn't have chose better words to say that. And when I think back on my own life, it's like I said, the Department of Charlotte's leaders that helped me was my family, the people in my family, my sister, my mom. And it taught me and helped me to lead my younger brother who's doing great right now. He's 11 years my junior, and he's just endeavoring to do things that are challenging, things that leaders are not afraid to step out and do. And so very proud of him, and all of those things helped me. And so I look back on it, and I think that you're right. So tomorrow's leaders and futures, it starts at home when they're younger. Those are the things where they are going to, build those things that will start developing the foundation of their character.
Yeah.
As they go through life, and they're going to experience school and friends and extracurricular activities, and even times of trouble and situations will help shape those things a little bit more, but it won't change the foundation. The foundation is being built, and I really strongly believe it's in that family unit. And family may not necessarily be blood family.
Exactly.
It's just it might be certain people that are strong support systems that you can rely on that has been there and had your back a very long time. And if I was to share anything with young people today that are going to be our future leaders, it will be to let them know that these folks that when they do that, it's because they love you, they care about you, they want what's best for you. You're not going to get it right away, but trust me, because I've received that on that other end. You will go back on it at some point in your life, and you'll reflect on it and say, the light bulb will go off. You're like, I know what they were getting at. I get it now. And so just hang on to that stuff and know that these people are working because they care about you. And I always believe also, Alvin, that generationally speaking, whether it's in your family or even just in our society, I've told my stepsons that I firmly believe something that my family instilled on me is that the next generation should advance at least one step further than the previous.
Yes.
So that's how we grow. That's how we progress as families, as a society, as people, as human beings. And even if you break out to separate demographics, this is how we progress. So when I step out of my house, I have to know what and who I represent, every day, and make sure that I represent extremely well so that we set the foundation for the next generation when they come out. It's like, okay, now you take it from here and take it to the next level.
Right.
It's critically important.
I agree very much. Too many of our youth often get stuck in their immediate situation, especially working in crisis. You've seen people get stuck in a situation and they just need some leadership, need some guidance. And I love that you've been able to plant seeds into your stepson's life and you start to see those fruit grow. That's beautiful. I love that.
It is. And, and I don't want to stop there. It's almost like, the friends that they brought around, kids in the neighborhood when they were growing up, the kids that I've coached, it's like, I've always tried in whatever way, if I can kind of help plant seeds in them in such a way that, it's like, what would I want my child to know if there was some adult in their life that I was connected with that would influence them on something positive?
Yeah.
So, I feel like we all have a level of responsibility, whether you're a father or a mother or not. You have some level of responsibility to contribute in some form of fashion with the young people of today. Because whether we like it or not, now in our generation, we're going to depend on them.
Yes, sir.
So if we don't invest in them in this way and encourage them to do better than what we've done,
yes,
not only will they struggle, we're going to struggle.
You said it.
And
yeah.
So we have to be cognizant of that.
You're exactly right, and that's why I do the work that I do, because it's not just for me personally, but because the future of our nation, the world, it relies on this next generation, and we've got to pour into and invest into ourselves by investing in them. I agree 100%.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Alvin, I know we parallel because he's worked in crisis services for some time.
Yeah.
And so, and I know this is a language that you speak, extremely well. It's so critical. It is something that I think our society is starting to be a little bit more aware, just a little bit more aware than it used to be, say, 10 to 15 years ago.
Yeah.
About how important it is about our mental health, our spiritual selves, those are tangibles. We put a lot of focus on primary care, which is wonderful. I think, this went today to go get my blood work done to make sure that that my blood sugar and all those things are intact. And those are routine things. All too often, we're not putting as much emphasis on routine checkups on our mental health, routine checkups on our spiritual status, and how we're feeling, those things that you really can't put on paper, or you can't physically touch. That is really important because that's part of our health, and so I'm happy to know that we're putting more attention on it. I do think it's unfortunate that sometimes it takes a tragedy we might see on television, or more come on it, and with a lot of our young kids that are dying on the streets because of misunderstandings and misinterpretations, and there are a lot of stereotypes going on. That it is so important for us to take don't let these tragedies not turn into triumphs.
That's right.
So we have to make sure that we're learning from these things so that we can grow and advance, and really make our society in a whole way. And so we're serving everybody as a whole person.
Mm-hmm.
And that really is mental health.
Exactly. You're right. Well, Neru, thank you so much for doing this interview. I greatly appreciate it.
Oh, when you reached out, I was honored and humbled that you reached out to me. I took it as a blessing from my own Lord and Savior, who was very key in my life. And so, I was grateful for the opportunity, and I appreciate your patience with me as you are trying to coordinate a time for me to do it. But I am so grateful to be able to do this, and my hope and prayer is that it has reached someone and has helped someone out there that you're working with and listening to your podcast. So, I am so grateful for you and everything that you've done, and I honor you in your service that you're doing right now. Full support of it. Thank you for what you do.
Thank you so much for listening to this podcast. Please be sure to subscribe, as well as providing a rating and review. Every week, I will interview a different leader and invite them to share with us their views and perspective on the relationship between leadership and family. Be sure to visit my website. It's www.alvinbonds2.com. That's ALVINBONDSII.com. Have a great day.